Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for this event on taking stock of global progress on nature-based solutions to climate change. So I think since we are on time, in fact, we're 5 minutes over, so let's get this event off the road. Let me first begin by maybe setting the scene a little bit. You know, this is the year of the Global Stocktake, as we all know. This is a really important year for assessing the progress that the international community has made as a whole in delivering against the goals of the Paris Agreement. And the GST is a really important part of the architecture of the Paris Agreement because it is a ratchet-up mechanism which has been set up in the Paris Agreement itself for countries to then come back with more ambitious NDCs from 2024 onwards. Now, as part of the global stocktake exercise, we all now recognize, and there is increasing recognition today, of the critical role that the world's ecosystems, the restoration, protection, and conservation of the world's ecosystems can play in addressing our joint climate and biodiversity challenges. So if we look at the challenge of climate change alone, we know that the world's ecosystems have important benefits to provide for both mitigation and adaptation. So recently, a couple of years back, UNEP and IUCN published a study that tried to quantify the mitigation benefits of nature-based solutions. And our estimate was that investing in the world's ecosystems, their protection, restoration, and sustainable management could help sequester and store at least 5 gigatons of CO2 by 2030 and up to 10 gigatons by 2050. Now, that's just on the mitigation side. If we look at the adaptation side of the equation, it's good to remind ourselves that just one ecosystem type alone, mangroves, have been estimated to provide over $65 billion in flood protection benefits each year, safeguarding 15 million people around the world. So the benefits of ecosystems are well known. Now, on account of this, there is also an increasing recognition of these nature-based solutions in the nationally determined countries nationally determined contributions that countries have been putting forward under the Paris Agreement. Back in 2019, IUCN, together with Oxford University, carried out an analysis of all the NDCs that had been submitted up to then, so the first generation of NDCs. And what we had found was that even back then, around 66% of Paris Agreement signatories had included nature-based solutions in their NDCs in one form or the other. But even at that stage, what we found that many of these inclusions were quite generic in nature. They were some of them had a lot of ambiguity around them. They were not concrete enough. Last year, our colleagues in Oxford University reviewed all the NDCs again and looked in particular at the 122 new NDCs that parties had submitted until December 2021. And what they found then was that there was some movement between the analysis that we had done back in 2019 and the analysis that was done in 2021. And a lot more countries have now incorporated nature-based solutions in a more concrete and specific manner in their NDCs. And just to give one example, what the analysis found was that around 48% or around 50 countries of the 122 had in fact explicitly included nature-based solutions in their NDCs. So in the spirit of the global stocktake, we are aware of the benefits that nature-based solutions provide for both mitigation and adaptation. We are also aware of the increasing incorporation of these nature-based solutions into NDCs, not only into NDCs, but also increasingly into national adaptation plans. But when we look at the issue of finance, which is again one important enabling condition under the global stocktake, what we are also reminded of is that, and this is again based on a study that our colleagues in UNEP did recently, was that if all the targets of the Rio Conventions, of the 3 Rio Conventions on climate change, biodiversity loss, and land degradation are to be met, the amount of financing that needs to be invested in nature-based solutions needs to be 3 times more than what it is today by 2030 and 4-fold more by 2050. So this is where we are at the moment in terms of the lay of the land on this particular topic. Now, having set that background, we are delighted to be joined today by an excellent set of panelists to talk through some of these elements in more detail. And at the outset, I must say, what a pleasure it has been to co-organize this event together with the governments of Germany and Peru, and in partnership with our colleagues in the COP27 presidency, Egypt, and of course our very close colleagues in the United Nations Environment Programme and their Global Peatlands Initiative. So what I'll do now is I'll briefly introduce each of the panelists, and I'll hand the floor across to them in turn for them to take us through the different elements of this event. So first of all, on my left, I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Christiane Paulus, who is the Director General of the Directorate on Nature Conservation in the Environment Ministry of the Government of Germany. And Germany is also a co-chair of the ENACT initiative that we will be discussing at this event. Then, on her right, I'm honored to introduce Ms. Tamer Abou Gharara, who is the advisor to the Minister of Environment of the Government of Egypt, representing the Egyptian COP27 presidency, but also, again, the ENACT co-chair. And ENACT, of course, as he will say, was an initiative that, and a partnership that we launched last year in Sharm el-Sheikh. Then we have Milagros Sandoval, who is the Director General of Climate Change and Desertification in the Ministry of Environment in the government of Peru. And to her right, we have Melissa de Kock, who is the Head of Biodiversity, People and Landscapes Unit at the United Nations Environment Programme based in Nairobi. And we are also waiting for a final speaker who we hope will be able to join us by the end of this session, which is Shabano Termizi, who is a representative from the UAE COP28 presidency. Now, as we all know, the incoming presidency has a lot of parallel obligations, so we hope that she'll be able to join us, but if not, I will communicate our message, their message on her behalf. So without any further ado, let me now give the floor to you, Dr. Paulus.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for the very kind introduction. Dear colleagues and participants, good afternoon to all of you, and a warm welcome also from my side here to Germany, to Bonn, to the UN negotiations. I'm really pleased to see so many people here in this room for this event, and I have to say, being a person coming from the biodiversity background, a CBD person, I'm very happy also to be in as a visitor and a regular guest in the climate world here in these negotiations, and that shows to me that the communities are talking to each other, are getting more interlinked, and start to understand each other, and that is also the issue of my talk, and why I would like to, why Germany is supporting this initiative, and what is our German point of view on the nature-based solutions. It has already been pointed out that we are facing several crises, two crises at one time, and we have to deal with them in an integrated manner. And as we see where we are standing at the moment in the midway of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Developments and far off track with these SDGs, I think it's clear for everybody that we cannot tackle one crisis after the other, but that we have to work in an integrated manner, and that we have to be fast, and that we have to create the maximum of multiple benefits that is possible. We have an unprecedented increase in global temperatures, and the negative effects on biodiversity are intensifying worldwide, and conversely, ecosystem degradation and loss intensify climate change. It's clear to all of you, we need to break this vicious circle, and we need to reverse also the destruction of ecosystem and biodiversity loss. I don't need to point once again to the need of having a healthy ecosystem with a high species diversity, also to contribute to resilience, to climate change mitigation, and to adaptation. And central aspects, as in both of the conventions or even in the 3 Rio conventions, I will come to this later on, is the global promotion and accelerated implementation of nature-based solutions. And what I hear from the negotiations and the days that you have already been working in here, this issue is really a big one here in these negotiations and in the talks. And I think it's very, very good, because nature-based solutions solutions are an essential element in our toolbox for transformation. And I've mentioned biodiversity and climate action already, but it's also necessary for sustainable development and for human well-being. And we try to forget that, but it's also all about our own future as a species here on this planet. We need faster, better implementation of nature-based solutions. We need effective safeguards and standards as they are highlighted in the UNEP resolution. For me, the definition that we achieved in Nairobi on UNEP was a major step forward, although I know that there are still things that need to be discussed and to be clarified, but I think it's a good starting point. Let me give you a few examples on the very needed synergies. For example, NBS provide the restoration of peatlands, one of the largest carbon reservoirs. They are essential to keep carbon on the ground, store and regulate water, and to provide a habitat for a multitude of animals and plants. And I'm very happy that my colleague from Peru is going to say and is going to share with us later the work that Peru is doing on these peatlands. And I'm very much interested in hearing your concrete examples. If we look at the latest IPCC report, one thing became very clear. Not only do nature-based solutions provide significant potential for mitigation and adaptation, those solutions are already available and do often come as a relatively moderate or low cost. And this is why at COP28, the role of nature in achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement must be right and in center, and it gives me great confidence that the COP28 presidency is giving a specific emphasis on nature, on their preparation. That is also reflected in the fact that they wanted to come, but I fully understand if they are too busy, and I'm sure that the message will be taken on.
We're late, but we're here.
Ah!
And it is no
Okay, I didn't see you
time.
coming,
So
so...
I'm literally running from one to another.
No, but I fully understand that.
I did not want to miss this given the importance that you place on
Okay, so thank you very much for raising your head. Yeah, in COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, with the first ever mentioning of the nature-based solutions in the cover decisions, we made another one big step, and we had the same for the CBD conference in Montreal earlier last year, and for the UNCCD, and all these three Rio conventions now recognize and describe the role of nature-based solutions, and I think there is a really great potential in that, especially when we look at the year 2024, when those conventions are meeting all in 1 year, have their COPs, and we really should work on having something overarching at 2024. In this year's COP, we will for the first time have this stock-taking process, taking stock on the progress made under the Paris Agreement. And from the German side, we call for action to course correct and raise ambition in the coming years. Technical dialogues of the Global Stocktake have very clearly highlighted the role of nature. We must now ensure that it's carried into the political phase and be ultimately fully reflected in the recommendations of the GST at COP28. Moreover, we hope for the inclusion of other areas that also need to be recognized and be covered and enable the protection of nature. And this is, for example, questions on resource use and on circular economy, as well as the role of water. All these things also contribute to climate protection and to biodiversity protection. Yeah, looking ahead, it is important that nature-based solutions are better and more comprehensively reflected in the formulation of the NDCs, and I hope that the GST can stimulate such action. It's also important that we mobilize more funding for nature-based solutions. And yeah, I've already mentioned that I see the year 2024, when the 3 conventions are taking place, to be a year of response, can be a year of response to the global stocktake. A few words on what we are doing at home here in Germany. We really want to we really want and we need to do something also in our own place. I mean, if you look outside, even in Germany, we have water shortage now and have very high temperatures and are facing difficult situation. We have agreed on a new federal action plan on nature-based solution for climate and biodiversity. It's somehow a bit German lengthy title, with the implementation of that action plan that has been accepted by the government and by the cabinet recently. We will protect, strengthen, and restore ecosystems. It links climate action with nature conservation and enables that degraded ecosystems regain their health. We are talking about a full system of ecosystems that we have in Germany, 10 fields of action: peatlands, forest ecosystems, seas and coast, settlement and transport area, as well as research and capacity building. And we have a number of €1 billion per year, which is really a game changer in nature conservation in Germany, but it's also not so easy to enroll a program from 0 to 1 billion within 1 year. But now we start enrolling it, and I hope that at the next meeting I can talk about some experience. I believe that using the synergies are a prerequisite for successful climate action, and this is why the Egyptian COP27 presidency and Germany, together with IUCN, launched the ENACT initiative at the COP27 Biodiversity Day. And I'm very grateful for Egypt for pushing this initiative together with us, and we really talked about the great collaboration of our 2 ministers in the last year. Germany has supported the idea from the very beginning and is pleased to be the co-chair and proud also. And just a short mentioning on what has happened since we launched last year. Colleagues from Egypt, IUCN, and Germany came together in March for an intense 2-day workshop on ENACT and discussed the upcoming state of NBS report that should be published at COP28. I'm sure you're also saying something in that, and also we discussed the work plan. And as this cooperation is flowering and flourishing, and we think that ENACT can really create the synergies that I've been mentioning before, I'm very happy that we also have more countries signaling to come in. France have recently joined, or in case of Peru, I've learned that they are also in the process of joining ENACT to support its work. And we are inviting other countries to be our partners and to be in this network to strengthen the role of NBS in the various negotiations. Now I leave it to my colleague Tamer from Egypt to tell us more about Egypt and where we currently stand. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to hear from the fellow panelists.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Paulus, for setting the scene and for highlighting the importance of safeguards, highlighting also the recognition of NBS across the 3 Rio conventions, and also the important and wonderful work that Germany itself is doing domestically in the space. Without any further ado, Tamer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you, Dr. Christina. Before I start, I would love actually to express my really appreciation to the government of Germany and to the Ministry of Nature Conservation and to the IUCN, because I remember actually when we launched this initiative on the 16th of November in 2022 at the margins of the COP27 of the UNEP CCC. it was something like a new baby, to be honest. But right now, actually, I can see things are more materialized and it's being, just grown up. So this is very important. It shows actually how we can see things are more materialized and more practical on the ground. So actually, this actually made us very happy. When we launched actually the initiative, we launched it in the Biodiversity Day, as I said. The Biodiversity Day, I was lucky to co-lead the organization of the day because we were working in partnership with the UNEP, or UN Environment, on how we organize the day. And we decided to organize the day in a story form, in a journey. Starts from the present, where we're talking about the nexus between climate and biodiversity and how they interact with each other. And at the same time, to the second chapter, the hope, where we're talking about the case studies, present activities that would lead us to specific objectives. Where we launched actually ENACT. So the ENACT was launched at the second chapter, which is hope. But the third chapter was basically the vision that actually gives us like a tool or a way that we can institutionalize the biodiversity conservation while at the same time we are responding back to the negative impacts or adverse impacts of the climate change. So ENACT, when we launched ENACT, actually we were thinking also about building synergies, ensuring synergies among the three Ray conventions that they were born together in 1992 and then they were split. We're just trying to ensure synergies. So if we look at the presentation, we will find that the vision of the ENACT, can we, yes. Yes, if we look at the ENACT vision, it basically aims to accelerate collective global efforts to address climate change, land and ecosystem degradation, and biodiversity loss, and provide a hub for parties and non-state actors working on NBS to collaborate and leverage support across the three Ray conventions, and provide collective voice for evidence-based policy on NBS for climate change, land degradation, and biodiversity. So we set targets as well for the initiative to be stated. Second slide, please. So the targets here, basically, we set some targets which are, I would say, ambitious, but at the same time, they are not that far to be achieved, which is enhanced protection and resilience of at least 1 billion vulnerable people, including at least 500 of women and girls to ensure the gender inclusion, and up to 2.4 billion hectares of healthy natural ecosystem secured through protection of 45 million hectares, sustainable management of 2 billion hectares, and restoration of 350 million hectares. And increase the global mitigation efforts significantly through protecting, conserving, and restoring carbon-rich terrestrial, freshwater, and marine ecosystem. Next, please. So, as I said here, that we had, before we launched the initiative itself, we had like inception meeting, or I would say virtual meeting held in Cairo in September 2022. And then we launched the initiative on the 16th of November at the margins of the COP27 of UNFCCC, specifically on the Biodiversity Day. And in December 22, also, we spoke about the initiative at the CBD COP15, that was held in Montreal. But actually, we had to do some, I would say, activities on the ground. So we had 2 days workshop, consultation workshop in March 2023. This workshop actually was divided into sections. The first section was basically consultation between Egypt, Germany, and IUCN to set the way forward, to set the rules, to set the products, to see how the initiative will work in order to reach UAE COP28 with something tangible and something that will make us more proud also of our baby. And on the following day, we had consultation on what we reached among us with all partners that they already included in the initiative. And they were quite happy, and then we're working very hard, as you will see today in my next slides. Next, please. We divided actually the activities or outcomes of the initiative into 3 work packages. The first one, which is, I would say here, the main outcome, which is the state of NBS report that would be developed on annual basis to see here the status of the NBS, how we're going to promote the case studies, how we're going to enhance the cooperation, even South-South cooperation, North-South cooperation, etc. This work package include develop an outline of the report itself, select authors that will be writing the report, develop also dashboard for ENACT, also revision of the data that would be used in the report itself, and then printing and circulation, and even to see how we're going to enhance, or I would say increase the number of the people that they will be reviewing the report itself. For this reason, we set some criteria for the report that will not be big report, it would be very concise, to the point, etc. And for the work package 2, also we're talking here about promoting ACT in several events. So actually today event actually is part of our activities, and also bring 30 additional partners in 2023. Hopefully, inshallah, we can have more than 30, and coordinate partner meetings, etc. And because we understand that these sort of things need to be promoted and dispatched, so we decided also to have a work package for communication. The communication here, we're talking about ENACT website, production of key NBS fact sheet, because we understand that most of people will not will not have time to read full report, but anyway, if we develop the short fact sheet to the point, that would be more interesting for most of them. And also production of guidance on action towards NBS goals. Next, please. What we have done in those 3 work packages, for the work package 1, we have already drafted the outline report, and we have discussed several points to be added there. And I think that the outline report will be shared with all partners shortly, so just they would be able to have a look and advise their feedback. We also identified some pool of experts that will be writing the report. We also agreed that we're going to enhance the geographical distribution among those experts, so the outcome would be reflecting the entire world, the global action. Also, we coordinate with NBS data sources to track progress on NBS goals. For the work package 2, which is building partnership, so we have right now 9 founding partners: Germany, Egypt, Norway, EU, Canada, Japan, Slovenia, Malawi, Republic of Korea, and France is being in process to be partner with us. France, yeah. And active discussion with potential partners like Pakistan, UK, UAE, Bureau, and we're happy that we have Bureau representative today. And for the work package 3, we have also developed flyer that has some updates that will be also distributed. That already we started distribution, but anyway, we're distributing this, and we agreed on some of the key events where the ENACT would be working and holding several events. One of them actually would be in August at the margins of the 7th Assembly of the Global Environmental Facility that would take place on 22nd of August in Vancouver. For the report itself that we developed the outline, okay. For the report itself, we have identified actually main social challenges which is food and water, urban and infrastructure resilience, disaster risk reduction, including green infrastructure, health and well-being, and just energy transition. However, we identified 5 cross-cutting themes also that should be covering all those specific challenges, which covers governance, private and public finance, indigenous people rights and gender inclusion, livelihoods and jobs, technology and innovation. And before I end my discussion, I just here would I would like to thank you all actually for attending with us. And I would like to say here that NBS can really provide multiple positive impacts at all levels, apart from nature conservation, ecosystem, and responding back to the adverse impacts of the climate change. It can provide jobs, incomes to the local communities, and thus secure the future of future generations. So I actually encourage you all actually to talk about ENACT, to encourage partners to be with us, because we have to save our planet for our future generations, because we have no other options. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamer, for providing such a fantastic overview of the ENACT initiative, and thank you again on behalf of everyone to the COP27 presidency for the leadership that Egypt showed on this with the support of Germany and others last year. Now there's a slight change in plan. I know that our Shabano, our colleague from the UAE presidency, has to leave for another consultation at 3:30, right? So Milagros, with your permission, and Melissa, with your permission, I'll just invite our colleague Shabano Termezi, who is the senior advisor on programs and partnerships on behalf of the UAE, COP28 presidency, to share what the UAE's vision is on nature for the forthcoming COP. Shabano, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and sorry, I don't mean to skip my turn with just the nature of things these days. As you've heard from both our colleagues from the German government as well as from Tamer from ENACT, nature has been identified as a priority theme for COP28 presidency. You see that reflected in the appointment of our high-level champion, Her Excellency Razan Al-Mubarak, who is also the president of the IUCN and has a very strong background in nature and conservation and environment. We really did want to make sure that we reflected the importance of the topic also in our leadership team, and she's been an advocate on this for a while. So we're working very hard both with the high-level champion team, the Marrakesh partnership, and really relying on the work and the leadership that both the COP26 presidency took when they spoke about nature financing with their 10-point plan for biodiversity financing, and then COP27 with the launch of ENACT, which we're very glad to be part of and try to take forward at COP28, really looking at how do you implement all these amazing things, Tamer, that you just spoke about right now, right? So you spoke about it being a baby and now it's in infancy. So I'm hoping by the time we reach COP28, it's almost a teenager where it's made a few mistakes, but still, you know, acted out and done certain things, and we have some results there. And I will go back after your tremendous presentation and explanation and really make sure that the next time you present, the UAE is, inshallah, a confirmed partner, not one you're in active discussions with. Just very briefly, nature and nature-based solutions at COP28. We are looking at 5 big priority areas. The first one looking at landscapes that are massive carbon sinks and also biodiversity hotspots, and looking at how do you protect these. So there's a lot of conversation going around with a number of countries in the big basins on how do you take a biome, a landscape, an ecosystem, and then really start protecting and conserving it by providing packages that are technical, financial, and policy by nature. So that's the first piece, looking at the land use aspect of it. The second element is looking at coastal area protection. So the UAE is, of course, part of the Global Mangrove Alliance, and MAC, which is the Mangrove Alliance Coalition. and also looking at oceans there. The third pillar is looking at private sector participation and action for nature. So how do we ensure that more private sector entities are reporting, have nature positive, similar to having net zero? The fourth piece is looking at nature finance at large and looking at innovative blended financing instruments to make sure that we can also be a platform for things like blue bonds, looking at debt conversion, nature-based solution payments for ecosystems. And then the fifth one is really looking at how do you make nature part and parcel and very central of the GST response. So, and in line with that, really looking at how do we work with countries to make sure that their NDCs and their NBSAPs and their NAPs are integrated. How do we ensure that we lend COP28 as a platform to also take stock of the commitments that came out of Montreal at CBT COP15, the amazing global biodiversity framework and the 30 by 30 planning. So really being a moment where we can try to make good on those promises, see what needs to be done, and how we can work together with the global community to meet those. In addition to that, I'd also like to maybe talk about COP participation. We held an event yesterday with our high-level champion, with the UNFCCC Secretariat, with the CBD Secretariat, and the UNCCD Secretariat, on really looking at how do you bring the 3 Rio conventions together, not just in policy and conversation, but in practice. What does that mean? The event that I was at just before this, we were discussing if you start putting together nature, oceans, land use, and agriculture, we're really looking at, the ocean, land use, agriculture, and nature-based solutions being able to provide upwards of 50% of the emission reduction that's needed to meet the 1.5 gap. That alone is massive. So, clearly, we need to make sure that the Rio conventions are integrated and these disciplines are coming together. So that's one piece. We're really trying to prioritize doing that. The second element is, as I said, based on the work and the leadership of COP26 and COP27 presidency, also starting to look ahead to, we don't know where COP29 will be, but COP30 with Brazil, with President Lula now, we know that is going to be a big focus. So we're already starting to think of, COP is not necessarily a landing point, but more a point of departure where you come and try to look ahead. So we're already thinking through what does that mean for the next 2 years, what does that mean for the next 3 years, and starting to look ahead on what we can do for nature and nature-based solutions. And then really also essentially looking at how do we ensure that there's linkages that come out of the climate COP in the UAE at the end of this year, and then feedback into CBD COP16, desertification COP also happening in the region in Saudi in 2024. So how do you really start bringing these together and not look at these as separate, discrete conversations where they happen, we leave, and then we come back again and restart kind of thing. So and that's really the way where we're setting up to respond to the GST and to come out with outcomes that live on beyond us. Just on the last point, we will have Nature, Land Use, and Oceans Day at COP. We have published our 2-week agenda about a month and a half ago to run a series of online global consultations. We've gotten a bunch of feedback. And it seems that partners are very happy to have the 3 themes together on Nature and Biodiversity Day, so we're happy about that. We've gotten varying feedback on whether it should be at the beginning of the 2 weeks, towards the end of the 2 weeks, the fact that it should be very close to the Food and Water Day. So we're working through those details, and we hope to be able to publish that information in the next maximum a month, so you can all start planning and thinking and looking at your delegations and knowing when exactly to come to the UAE for these conversations. And just in line with the programming piece, we have also opened our call for programming and events, both in the blue zone and the green zone. So if you go to the COP website, which is cop28.com, and search through program, there's a form there where you can apply. We're really encouraging partners to come and put in their expressions of interest as coalitions and as group of stakeholders versus a single entity. And that we're trying to do that, because we see the power of partnerships and collaboration and really think, we should work through existing coalitions. And the second piece is we have got a lot of feedback, particularly from our Egyptian colleagues, to try to minimize programming and consolidate, because we're having several of these conversations in parallel that are overlapping versus trying to get people together. So again, just working very closely with partners, with the high-level champion team, climate champions. We've got Nadi at the back, who represents Her Excellency Razan's portfolio at AHLC, Marrakesh Partnership, and others, to really stop talking and start doing, because we know there is no Paris without nature. So thank you very much, and apologies that I won't be able to stay for your interventions, but I hope to catch up with you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shabano, for laying the lay of the land out in very close detail, so that we know what to expect over the coming months. And thank you also to the UAE presidency for its leadership in profiling the importance of nature-based solutions in delivering against our climate and biodiversity targets. Of course, we are all aware that nature-based solutions alone cannot do the job, and the work that needs to happen on nature-based solutions needs to be in the context of ambitious and timely action in other sectors to keep 1.5 alive. But nature is an important part of that equation. And as a community, I think we will all look forward to working together in supporting the UAE presidency this year. So thank you very much again. And I realize you have to leave, but thank you again. Without any further ado, let me now get back to our original run of show and invite Milagros from the government of Peru. Peru, of course, has done a lot of interesting and important work, particularly in the area of peatlands. And I know that you will be sharing a slide deck, so I'm just going to bring that on, but you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and it's a great joy to share this side event with colleagues from the Ministry of, with the government of Germany, as well as other colleagues, UNEP and others. Definitely for us, it's really important to start to highlight especially what we're doing right now in activities related to nature, and how this is building up for the case of Peru, that we're going to set up and establish a specific target related to nature-based solutions. We already have more than 33 measures related to mitigation and adaptation that are related to nature-based solutions. This is very important because definitely Peru's economy is based mainly in nature, and that is why, obviously, this is one of the most important issues why we are a very vulnerable country. But we believe that definitely nature is also the solution that can support the process to achieve our NDC. So in this specific time, I would like to share with you a specific work we've been doing related to NDC measure. Related to peatlands and how we've been working on the ground and why it is important, why peatlands are so important in Peru. Next, please. So this is our NDC measure's name is Amazonan Peatlands, Conservation and Sustainable Management. But first, let me explain why peatlands are so important to Peru. They represent around 5% of Peru's land surface. But that doesn't mean, although it could mean little, the percentage, we understand that this percentage is storing as much carbon as all the country's forests. And as you know, Peru is the second largest Amazon country in South America. And we have the third biggest areas in peatlands in the world. So definitely these areas are very important. They not only store carbon related to mitigation, but they're also very linked to adaptation activities that we're doing on the ground. The importance of these areas is not only, as I mentioned, related to carbon, and here we have a gap of information of how many carbon we have sequestered under the ground. We only have right now information more in the surface and the trees, but also it is important because these areas are definitely part of the important for the livelihoods of people, especially indigenous peoples, as well as riverine communities that live thanks to the products that these peatlands give, especially a fruit that's called aguaje, and that you'll see this palm tree. And this is one of the main causes of threats to these peatlands, that is the commercial logging of female aguaje palm trees. This is an Amazon fruit that in Peru we use a lot. As well, there are other issues related to hunting, wood extraction, road construction, and illegal mining that threat these areas. However, historically, these areas have not been threatened. So these areas do not have much deforestation if we see them historically. But the threats are coming now. So that's important also to consider, because normally many of the incentives we have worked under the UNEP are based on historical threats. So that's also important to take into consideration, because definitely these areas that are so important and that we're understanding more the importance of these areas each time that we start investigating or assessing or researching on this process, we identify the importance of this area not only for nature-based solutions, but definitely also for biodiversity. Next, please. So why is it important, and why did we engage to do a measure related to mitigation for the NDC? Well, as I mentioned, this measure contributes to closing our NDC gap. We have a new ambition since 2020, and our ambition now is to reduce the gap that we have related to our ambition, because we had previously identified measures, but we need to continue identifying measures to reduce the gap we have, so to achieve our NDC with the ambition we proposed or we put together in the end of 2020. We're also sending a commitment of Peru, a signal to the world of Peru's commitment for peatland conservation. These areas are very important, not only for Peru, but in overall for the world. They are important for research, for identifying adaptation and mitigation issues, and as I mentioned, also related to biodiversity. We are trying to preserve the livelihoods of indigenous and riverside populations, especially those that are very linked to commercializing this product, that is the aguaje. But obviously there are other products that we need to identify that are still being researched. A big portion of biodiversity is found in these peatlands. We find different types of wildlife in these areas. And obviously, this is also linked to the livelihoods of indigenous peoples living here. This area also provides ecosystem services related to water and buffering against floods, and definitely there are different and important benefits that these areas have. And also, this allows us to lead regional wetland conservation as a climate action. And definitely this is part, and you can see in the middle of the slide, this is how the fruit, the aguaje, looks, and which is part of the economy of local communities living in this area. Next, please. So, in overall, so how do we go further in our climate ambition? Next, please. No, I think this is a slide of, I don't know if you can see the pictures. No, I think it's pictures, but anyway. So many, just to wrap up and explain a little bit more related, and also how we can link to this initiative that is definitely for us very important, as you mentioned, is part of what we're assessing to be able to be part of the initiative. Three main messages that I want to convey related to working as a developing country on these processes, and how are we trying to achieve our NDC. So to continue supporting this process and working on this process, first, we need better information. And we have been discussing in the UNEP premises the need, for example, of better inventories to address the BTRs, this new cycle that we're going to work in. So to work and clearly know what Peru or other developing countries can bring to the table to support climate action, we need better information. We need better research. We need to reduce the gap on information that we have. And as I mentioned, in the case specifically of peatlands, we need to understand what's below the ground. We still don't know exactly how much carbon we have below the ground. And this is irreplaceable carbon. If we lose this, we're going to have a lot of problems because it's an important ecosystem. Also, a second message that I want to explain is that this is to preserve this area, to conserve this area. It is not only an activity that's being done by one stakeholder. We need a diversity of stakeholders to be part of this process. The academia, NGOs, cooperation have been part of this process as well, but we also want to engage the private sector. The private sector can link these processes, can support us in investing on sustainable productive activities on the ground. Especially the aguaje has very important co-benefits that I will invite you to Google, or if you want, I can explain us. I'm not going to go through that, but I invite you to understand what this fruit implies in the Amazon culture. And also definitely for us, it's important to engage not only the private sector, but also how the private sector can engage with indigenous peoples, with local and riverine communities to give incentives to support these processes. And the third, and definitely not less important, is how we can address the threats related to biodiversity loss and how we can engage and link different conventions, obviously on the ground, how we can convey these messages, but also how can we link these processes to different overarching issues such as gender and obviously intercultural dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Milagros, for giving us this concrete example of one particular ecosystem and how Peru is actually trying to raise the ambition of its NDC, through the better conservation and management of peatlands. And also thank you for highlighting the important role of indigenous peoples and local communities in this process. So our last speaker today, but certainly not the least, is our colleague Melissa de Kock from UNEP. And Melissa, of course, you've heard about how nature-based solutions has, as Dr. Paulus pointed out, in the 3 Rio Conventions. But of course, before it got into the 3 Rio Conventions, there was also the UNEA resolution that was adopted in March last year, which in a sense, built directly on the IUCN definition on nature-based solutions that our members had adopted back in 2016 in Hawaii. So please tell us more about what's going on in the UNEA process and the intergovernmental consultations on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all to the great panelists. It's a bit disconcerting to come at the end of the session after such interesting information. And thank you all to you for being here today quite late in the day. So as other panelists have mentioned, for UNEP, nature-based solutions are definitely one of the most effective means to address the planetary crisis, including that of climate change and biodiversity loss, and simultaneous too. While the focus of today is about climate change, I do want to highlight that nature-based solutions can address multiple challenges at the same time. So we're talking about unemployment, we're talking about water insecurity, food insecurity, poverty, and of course climate change, all while reducing environmental degradation and biodiversity loss. So it really is a phenomenal tool that we have at our disposal to tackle these challenges. According to a UNEP ILO report published last year, nature-based solutions can create as many as 20 million new jobs in various sectors, including forestry, fisheries, agriculture, in green development infrastructure, as well as, of course, in biodiversity conservation. As Sandeep said, and Milagros so well illustrated with her example, nature-based solutions have vast potential to address both climate change adaptation and mitigation. But I have to say that nature-based solutions are not an excuse to continue emitting. They have to be done simultaneously with rapid decarbonization. I also want to point out, like Milagros pointed out, that it's essential that indigenous people and local communities are decision makers in anything to do with nature-based solutions in and around their lands and their territories and their waters. This for UNEP is a non-negotiable. IPLCs are central to nature-based solutions. So having said all that, let me come to the point that Sandeep asked me to talk about. As he said, at the 5th UN Environmental Assembly in March 2022, a resolution on nature-based solutions for supporting sustainable development was agreed. The resolution calls on UNEP to convene intergovernmental consultations to develop a common understanding amongst member states and stakeholders on NBS, as well as to address 3 tasks. Now, these 3 tasks are to compile best practice examples of NBS from around the world and in different ecosystems, to assess various criteria, standards, and proposals that are related to nature-based solutions, and critically, to identify sources of funding for nature-based solutions implementation, specifically for developing countries. I also want to point out that the resolution includes the first multilaterally agreed definition on nature-based solutions, which to date had been a stumbling block in negotiations at the CBD and UNFCCC. So the UNEA resolution includes a very comprehensive definition on nature-based solutions. So thanks to the funding received from the European Commission, from Canada, and from France, we have been able to kick off these consultations. And these started with a virtual consultation in May of this year, from the 16th to the 17th, which were represented by more than 300 participants, representing 75 member states and more than 50 different stakeholders. So we were very pleased to have such wide representation, which indicated quite a lot of interest in nature-based solutions. The consultations included a number of interventions from member states and stakeholders, primarily expressing their support for nature-based solutions and the concept, and they were very keen to get going on implementation. However, I would be remiss to say that to exclude that some did raise concerns about nature-based solutions, specifically with regards to the greenwashing and the ability of polluters to continue polluting while saying nature-based solutions offset their pollution, but also of doing harm to indigenous peoples and local communities. As such, it is essential to determine good and bad practice for nature-based solutions, or rather for interventions that are referred to as nature-based solutions. The same also goes for how interventions use or impact biodiversity. If it's not sustainably using indigenous biodiversity, can it be called a nature-based solution? And these are the sort of elements that we want to be able to get from the consultations. A very important issue raised by developing countries, however, was the need for finance for nature-based solutions. There is a lot of finance going in towards nature-based solutions, but 92% of this is spent domestically in donor countries in the global north. We really need funding for NBS in the global south. What is clear, however, is that there's increasing support and traction for nature-based solutions. And this is also evidenced in the fact that it's in targets 8 and 11 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, as well as being referred to in the Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan from last year. The UNEA mandated consultations will build on this momentum, and the May consultations set the scene, but these will now be followed by regional consultations in June and July, as well as which will be held virtually, as well as an in-person consultation, both regional and global, which will be held in Nairobi from the 9th to the 13th of October. We really encourage member states and all accredited stakeholders to register for these consultations, both the virtual regional as well as the in-person consultations in October, and engage in defining a future course for nature-based solutions. We're looking towards a course that will seek to ensure the implementation of nature-based solutions that are both equitable and sustainable and address multiple challenges simultaneously. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Melissa, for bringing us all collectively up to speed with the discussions around NBS in the UNIA process that UNEP has been convening. We from IUCN are fully supportive of, just everything that you said, including the concerns that are highlighted. We share those concerns, and it's really important that when NBS be done, it be done right, in the right context, using the right practices. And from our end, we have the IUCN Global Standard on nature-based solutions with its 8 criteria and 28 indicators, at least even at this stage, to help adjudicate between what is acceptable NBS and what is not. So going forward, we look forward, very much to continuing working with our colleagues in UNEP with this process. So now I think we've come to the end of all the interventions. We have 10 minutes left until the close of our session. So I'd like to open it up for questions. Please raise your hand if you have any questions to ask of our panelists. Keep your questions brief, please. Just introduce who you are, where you are from. We'll collect a few questions and then we'll relay those across to our panelists. And I have a couple of my colleagues with mics, so yeah, please. Maybe one to the lady in the front. I can see a hand here, and one to the gentleman at the back.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much for these interesting inputs and statements. My name is Svenja Schuchmann. I represent Climate Alliance. It's a city network focused on climate, obviously, and we have a few activities around nature-based solutions, and I found it very interesting to hear about the Enhance initiative, and wanted to ask if the initiative will also include non-state actors, or if this is something for member states. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Please, sir, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Gareth Phillips from the African Development Bank. Melissa, I very much appreciated your point about the importance of nature-based solutions for biodiversity. We are at the African Development Bank. We're about to start screening all our projects for Paris alignment. And actually, I think if we started screening nature-based solution projects for carbon sequestration, I think we would find that they are not adapted to climate change, because you can't say that you're going to use those for offsetting carbon, because there are lots of examples of natural forest burning down and forests that don't usually burn now being destroyed. So I wanted to emphasize that point. And I'm sorry, the lady from Peru, I didn't catch your name. I wanted to ask if you were planning to just count the carbon in your national inventory and help meet your NDC, or are you planning to also try to sell those as offsets? Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Any more questions? We can collect a couple more. I don't think we'll have a chance for a second round, so you have questions, please ask them now. The lady in the front, and then there's a hand at the back.
Thank you. So it's Sabine Reinecke from University of Freiburg. Thank you for the presentation. I really liked also the narrative of thinking integrated and seeing also the conventions working closely together. Beyond that, I mean, it's been in some of the presentations, but I think at the core of all this is food. Like if you look at what is driving all the problems related to desertification, related to biodiversity loss, but also the climate change crisis in the sector, we have to also talk about the systems of how we produce food. And is that a theme that you also will cover? Although apparently there's no international convention on food, there is of course an organization dealing with that. And isn't that in a way also a direction that this whole partnership should move in terms of finding solutions also in the system, which apparently needs to transform a lot?
Great, thank you. Please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for excellent panel. I'm from the University of Calgary, Canada, and I work in bio-inspired design. And I'm wondering whether we could start adding nature-inspired solutions as well, and not just nature-based solutions. I find that a lot of our discussion is still about, right, nature in service of human beings. Where is the voice of nature? Nature has been doing R&D for 3.8 million years, or billion, pardon me, years, and there's a lot of good solutions to be found in natural strategies. So I'm hoping maybe you can add some voices to speak for nature. We happen to be super monkeys who talk a lot, but there's a lot of good information to be gleaned from nature. So I'm wondering if you could comment on that.
Great, thanks. And then I think we have one last hand over here.
Sandeep knows I love questions. Hi everyone, I'm Kathy, the Deputy Chair of the Climate Crisis Commission of IUCN. On ENACT specifically, just wondering if there are any plans to further involve civil society constituencies of the UNFCCC process and how to best utilize the broad networks out there to ensure the voices and the work of civil society stakeholders at local level are being reflected in the future plan of ENACT. Thanks.
Great. Thank you all for those great questions. So I think there was a question that was addressed, on the issue of offsetting and also on the Peruvian experience on NDC. So maybe, Melissa, you can try and answer the offsetting part of it, but also Milagros, both of those questions. And then I think there were a number of ENACT-related questions. Tamer, perhaps you could handle those. And then there was this very interesting question about, the food system being a driver of biodiversity loss. And Dr. Paulus, maybe you can, try and address that. And then we'll see. Maybe we'll come back for a final round of remarks as well. So,
Thank you very much. So I'll just address the comment made by the gentleman from African Development Bank. Absolutely, people talk about nature-based solutions, or they talk about conservation, or they, talk about food systems, and how it might offset the impacts of, not offset the impacts, rather mitigate against climate change. What we often forget, though, is that climate change affects these natural systems hugely. And a term that is often used, but not enough in biodiversity conservation or nature-based solutions, is climate-informed or climate-smart. And at UNEP, we're trying to ensure that our biodiversity conservation work is climate smart, and that includes nature-based solutions, because there's no point in talking about a REDD+ intervention when the forest is burning down, as you pointed out. So we also need to help nature adapt. Nature is a huge tool for us to help people adapt in terms of ecosystem-based adaptation, but we also need ecological adaptation where we're helping nature to adapt. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the questions. I also just wanted to chime in to the question. Right now, we're working with the Ministry of Finance, also between the government of Peru, in a taxonomy process, in which to identify and give some sort of criteria to banks, especially to our financial institutes in Peru, to where they can point their activities related to climate change and biodiversity. So this is an ongoing process that we're having now, and that we hope to also disseminate more information in the near future. But definitely there are a lot of countries that are working on that as well. On the issue related to carbon and carbon offsets, first of all, I think it's important to understand that most of the emissions in many developing countries come from the LULUCF sector, right, from land use change. So in the case of Peru specifically, 47.9% of our emissions come from LULUCF. So that gives us also a big understanding of where we want to target our activities and how we're going to reach our NDC. Mainly that is related to, obviously, the forest sector and how we can support that process. And definitely, it is not a secret that Peru is also working on its registry for our mitigation measures. That's called RENAMI, and through that process, we have already put a consultation process in place to explain the procedures, the administrative procedures that will be linked to that registry. That is linked, obviously, to Article 6. But also linked to voluntary carbon markets, so that can support as well the NDC. So that is part of a process we're ongoing now, but definitely our main target and our principal role is to address the goal that we have established in the NDC. If there's anything additional, we can work on carbon markets. Thank you very much.
I would say here about partners, because I can see that many comments coming for the partners with ENACT from the civil society or from the indigenous people. I would start with a statement. I love it because, well, it was at the heart of the core of Local Agenda 21, that people should be seen as a part of the solution rather than a part of the problem. So the answer is definitely yes, especially that already the indigenous people is from the targets of ENACT itself, so definitely they would be working. And for this reason, you will find here the website for ENACT, so just whoever would be interested to participate or to be partner, we welcome this. Apart from this, that as I said, that we're going to have several consultations, even on the draft report and even on the outcomes, etc. So we believe that we would be able to, for the interested civil society to be part of those consultations. So I think this is the main question. And for food comment, it's already from the social challenge, along with the water, that would be covered as a core 5 social challenges. So it's already covered within the scope of ENACT. Thank you. If you'd like to add something.
Yeah, I thank you. I add something on the statement that in the core is food. I fully agree to you. Coming from the biodiversity world, we have this biodiversity crisis because of unsustainable land use, even without the climate crisis. And this biodiversity crisis is there before we even started about thinking of climate change. And I think we are very aware about that something is going wrong, that we need a transformation of the food sector, and that the insecurity and the risk in food production is growing with the loss of biodiversity, but it also has a very strong climate impact, because when I see that a deep frozen pizza from the normal supermarket is produced from 3 or 5 contains components from 3 or 5 continents that are carried around the world, I think there is something desperately wrong in the system, or especially in the price of such a product. And finally, I would like to thank for the statement on nature-inspired solution. I think it's also very important not to forget about the voice of nature. In the CBD context, we have this Mother Earth discussions, and we try to give it space. And thank you very much, not to look at nature from the economic point of view, but also from a more, not anthropocentric, but from a more nature-orientated position. Thank you.
Great. Well, first of all, allow me to thank all the panelists for answering those questions. I'm sure you may have more questions. We are around. I think we need to leave this. We need to end this event at 4, but we are very much around to follow up with you and answer any other questions that you might have. There's a contact email on the slide to know more about ENACT. So let me just maybe bring this session to a conclusion, to an end, by thanking, first of all, our panelists today for having, graciously accepted the invitation to share their experiences in our event here. I would also like to thank my colleagues Delilah and Yulia and Ali, who are in the room and who have really, been the force in driving this event together, especially on our work on ENACT. So please, thank you all once again for coming, and join me in thanking our panelists.